people who try to bend our Creator's division of days in order to satisfy their own understandings. Proverbs 3 verse 5. Trust in Yahweh with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. Now I'm not asking you to lean into my understanding either. All I present here is the scripture's order of operation. Just the facts. Now there are those who attempt to keep Sabbath, a continuous count, by using the named days on the Gregorian calendar. So being a truth seeker, I wanted to explore the roots of Saturday Sabbath. First, let's understand that we are told to number our days, not name them after false gods. It was those very false gods that were the cause of the true Sabbath being taken away from the Jews to begin with. Now, shortly after leaving Egypt, the Israelites made a golden idol, and a false feast was declared to honor Yahuwah. Tomorrow is the feast to Eloah, proclaimed Aaron, the brother of Moses. Now, this was not a true appointed feast of Yahuwah, but rather for the deity Saturn, for which the calf was a symbol. This feast took place on Saturn's day, which was the day the Egyptians worshipped their gods. This was the beginning of the Hebrews worshipping Saturn's day outside of the bondage of Egypt. So now we're going to fast forward to Amos, approximately 689 BC. And we again find the house of Israel keeping feasts other than the ones appointed by Yahuwah at Mount Sinai. Eloah is so angry and fed up with these false feasts that he condemns the whole house of Israel to the worship of the hosts of heaven, the tabernacle of Saturn, which they had made, thus the false Saturday Sabbath. Amos 5, starting with verse 21. I have detested, I have thrust away your holiday feast, and in no way shall I savor your festivals. Verse 25. Have you brought near sacrifices and food offerings to me 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? Verse 26. But you have borne the tabernacle of your god Molech, and Saturn, your images of the star of your god, which you made to yourselves. Now this word born, but you have borne up. So the word is nasa in the Hebrew. And no, nasa does not mean deceived. Deceived is nashah. Nasa means to bear up, suffer, receive, but can also mean to marry, that is to be intimate with. So basically, Yahuwah is saying, you were intimate with your star god, and you're not worshiping me. You're being intimate with them, not being intimate with me. Acts 7 verse 42. And this is their punishment. And Eloah turned and delivered them up to serve, to worship the host of heaven, as it has been written in the book of the prophets. Did you not offer to me victims for slaughter and sacrifice for 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the tent of Molech, and the star of your god Saturn, the figures which you made in order to worship them. And I will remove you beyond Babylon. Back to Amos, Amos 5:4. For so says Yahuwah to the house of Israel, seek me and live. Verse 5. But do not seek Bethel, and do not enter Gilgal, and do not cross over Beersheba. For Gilgal is going into exile, and Bethel shall be for nothing. Seek Yahuwah and live, that he not break out like a fire on the house of Joseph to consume, and no one is putting it out for Bethel. So remember, the golden calf, Saturn, had once again been erected by Jeroboam in 1 Kings 12:25-33. We read about that. But this time, he had set them up in Bethel. He put one in Bethel and one in Dan. And Amos is stating that their Saturn god in Bethel cannot put out the fire that Yahweh is sending upon the house of Joseph. That this god of Saturn has no power. He cannot put out the fire. So he goes on to say that it is Yahuwah which created the stars. So in other words, they were not to worship the creation of the stars, sun, moon, and 5 planets, but are to worship their creator. Amos declares that Israel had set up an idolatrous shrine and false feasts dedicated to Saturn. They were worshiping in the tabernacle of Saturn, declaring Saturn to be their king and star god. Acts 7 verse 38. This is he who was in the congregation in the wilderness, with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the living words to give to us. Verse 39. To whom our fathers would not be obedient, but thrust him away and turned back again to Egypt in their hearts. Verse 40, saying to Aaron, make gods for us who will lead the way for us. As for this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him. Thus they made a calf in those days and offered sacrifice unto the idol and rejoiced in the work of their own hands. Then, some 800 years after the Exodus, the word of Yahuwah came to Ezekiel. He was commanded to bring charges against Israel for the sins of their forefathers, because they had not left the Egyptian idols behind, and they abolished Yahuwah's Sabbath and set time appointments from the get-go in the wilderness. Due to this abominable sin, Yahuwah cursed Israel with set time ordinances that would lead them and their children to death and not to life. So, still some 800 years after the Exodus, the Israelites were still not following the proper Sabbaths. Then I said to them, Each of you, get rid of the abominable images that you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yahweh, your Eloah. And they revolted from me, and wanted not to listen to me. Each threw not away the abominations of their eyes, and the practices of Egypt they abandoned not. And I spoke and poured out my rage upon them, to complete my anger among them in the midst of Egypt. But I did not, since that would have brought dishonor to my name. For in the presence of the people among whom they were living, I had announced to Israel that I was going to lead them out of Egypt. So I brought Israel out of Egypt, and led them into the wilderness, and gave them my orders, and I made known my ordinances to them, how if a man should do them, he shall live by them. So the word orders, which I think I could probably do a whole study on just this word orders, because it's kind of fascinating to me, because in the Hebrew it's kupa. Now a kupa is a sukkah, which covers. So these orders symbolically or spiritually cover us. The kupa, it's our Creator's covering, his kupa. So orders, kupa, the Hebrew 2708, and it means appointed, set time, customs. So I gave them my appointed set times, my customs, and made known my ordinances. This word ordinances is mishpat. The Hebrew 4941, and it means divine law and ceremonies. So I made known my divine law, my ceremonies to them, and how if a man should do them, he shall live by them. Ezekiel 20:12, and my Sabbaths I gave to them for a sign between me and between them, for them to know that I am Yahweh, the one sanctifying them. And the house of Israel greatly embittered me in the wilderness. In my appointed set time orders they did not go, and my divine law and my ordinances they thrust away, which a man shall do them and shall live by them, and they profaned my Sabbaths exceedingly. And I spoke to pour out my rage upon them in the wilderness, to completely consume them. So the Most High is furious because Israel isn't following his laws and appointed times. Ezekiel 20:15, and I lifted my hand against them in the wilderness, the thorough one, to not bring them into the land which I gave to them, the land flowing milk and honey. The honeycomb is beyond all the land. Verse 16, because they thrust away my divine law, and in my set appointments they went not by them, and they profaned my Sabbaths, and they went after the thoughts of their own hearts. Now the King James translates this as, their heart went after their idols. So they profaned the Sabbath. This word profaned is halal, H2490, and it means to dissolve, to break one's word. And the Israelites had promised at the foot of Mount Sinai to follow all that Yahweh had instructed. But almost immediately, they broke that promise. Ezekiel 20, verse 17, and my eye spared them to not wipe them away, and I did not commit them unto consumption in the wilderness. Now the next verse gives warning to the new generation of Israel, a warning not to practice the set time statutes that their fathers had observed in honoring their idols. Ezekiel 20:18, but I said unto their children in the wilderness, walk not in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their ceremonies, nor defile yourselves with their idols. So in the Hebrew, this word statutes is kok, H2706, and it means an appointment, set time, convenient custom. Convenient custom. So do not walk in the convenient customs of your father. So do not walk in the convenient customs of your father, nor observe their ceremonies, nor defile yourself with their idols. The one excuse that we hear the most for not being able to follow our Creator's calendar is how hard it is to get days off during the beast's work week. So many do what is convenient. As long as they are observing a day, their conscience is clear. But the Most High isn't having it. Now, years ago, we met with a couple who had questions about the calendar. And as we went through the days of assembly, we spoke about the Rosh Chodesh, the head of each month, explaining to them that this day was also a set-aside day. And their reaction was, not another day off. That just won't work with our schedule. Now they observe Saturday as Sabbath because it works with their schedule. And if asked, they would tell you, it is the day that the Jews do. So weren't they the chosen people? And I hear that a lot about Jewish Saturday. They're the chosen people. But first, we need to understand that the chosen are called Israel and not Jew or Jewish. And in order to be part of Israel, we must live by his set time appointments, not the customs of those still under his sentence. Ezekiel 20:19. I am Yahweh your Eloah. Go by my orders, my set time appointments, and keep my ordinances, my divine laws, and do them. And my Sabbaths, sanctify them. And it will be a sign between me and you to know that I am Yahweh your Eloah. See, they were looking at Yahweh as their Eloah. They were looking at these idols from Egypt. Saturn was who their God was. Ezekiel 20:21. And they rebelled against me. And their children went not by my orders, not by my ordinances. They guarded not to do them, which if a man does them, he shall live by them. And my Sabbaths they profaned. And I spoke to pour out my rage upon them, and to complete my anger against them in the wilderness. And I turned my hand against them and acted because of myself, so that my name should not be thoroughly profaned before the nations, from whom I led them out of. Verse 23, and I lifted up my hand against them in the wilderness to disperse them among the nations and scatter them in the places, because they did not observe my ordinances, and they thrusted away my orders and profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after the thoughts of their fathers. So even these latter generations, they just weren't getting it. And so I gave them up to orders. I gave them up to set appointed times that were not good, and ordinances, divine laws, customs that lead to death. Wow. So these scriptures very plainly show that right from the beginning, keeping the true Sabbaths and set time appointments was a problem for the Hebrews. They were very quick to abolish his beautiful meetings that led them into his presence, into life, instead of choosing the dead idols of Egypt, which led to death. This always blows me away, that after all they witnessed and promised to do at the Mount of Sinai, and I try to imagine it, what it would have been like that day in the awe of it all, and to be in that presence and to feel that ruach across the camp, and I couldn't even imagine how that would feel. And then just to toss it aside, because it was new and it was different, and we couldn't see this God, and we needed a God we could see so we could worship it, because this was the unseen God. Wow. So the Hebrews from the time of Exodus into Amos, Nehemiah, and Ezekiel's time offered their sacrifices not to Yahweh, but to their wandering star god, Saturn. They worshipped in the tabernacle of Saturn, declaring Saturn to be their king and God. Thus Yahweh delivers them up to marry, that is to be intimate with and serve the host of heaven, Saturn, therefore suffering the consequences. Now this sentence has never been lifted to this day. Now the Jews call the planet Saturn by the name Shabbat. This has confused some to think that this Hebrew word for Saturn is equivalent to the seventh day of creation, the true Sabbath of the Bible. Even before the rise of Christianity, the Romans, aware that the Jews rested every 7 days, attributed this to the role played in their religion by Saturn, and referred to the Jewish Sabbath as Saturn's Day, therefore known as the Sabbath of Saturn. In Histories 5.2, Tacitus was considered one of the greatest Roman historians from 56 to 120 AD, and he writes of the Jewish Sabbath, quote, "We are told that the seventh day was a mark of respect to Saturn." The Jews identified Saturn, or Kronos in the Greek, as the Semitic El, which is short for Loa. Now the Greeks recognized Kronos as the Phoenician god of time, or El Olam, which would be rendered Olamus in the Greek. So by the 2nd century in Rome, the day when the Jews celebrated the Sabbath was called Saturni Dies, and eventually Saturday in English. This is why the Messiah untied the Sabbath of the Jewish leaders in an attempt to return them to the old ways and the Father's proper set times. He spoke of the old ways that had been lost to them. And Paul lamented for his kinsmen, but rejoiced for the Goyim, for the nations who were given the truth about the Sabbath. That it is not merely the children born through natural descent who are regarded as Yahweh's children, but it is the children born through the promise who were regarded as descendants. So the idea of chosenness, therefore, is independent of consideration of lineage, but is directly related to our response to Eloh's promise. Being Israel is not a static title, it is a designation. And those accepting the covenant is the true Israel at large. These are the ones that Peter refers to as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. 1 Peter 2:9. Both Hebrew and Goyim, Jew and Gentile, can be Israel through the promise.
I needed the best connection for a big moment. With us down,
Gentile can be Israel through the promise. Jubilees 1:7-14. Moshe is now told how the people will forsake Yahweh in the land of promise. You must write for yourself all these words, which I make known to thee this day, for I know their rebelliousness and their stubbornness, before I will lead them into the land which I have sworn to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your seed I will give this land which flows with milk and honey. Then they will eat and be satisfied, but they will turn to strange gods, to those who cannot save them from their affliction. But this testimony will be heard as testimony against them, for they will forget all of my commandments, everything which I will command them. They will walk after the Gentiles, after the nations, and after the defilement and shame. They will serve their gods, and these will become for them an offense, an affliction, a torment, and a snare. Many will be destroyed and taken captive. They will fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have deserted my ordinances and my commandments, and the annual festivals of my covenant, and my weekly Sabbaths, which I have sanctified, separated, set apart for myself among them. Wow, they have deserted the annual festivals and weekly Sabbaths of Yahweh's covenant from the very beginning. Jubilees 6:34. And all the children of Israel will forget, and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the renewals, the monthly Kadeshas, and the seasons, the Moed appointed times and the feasts, and the Shabbats. Verse 35, and they will go wrong as to the order of the years, to the Jubilees, for I know, and from henceforth I will declare it unto thee. And it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant, the feasts of the covenant, the doorposts where we put the all through our ear, so we can never leave his covenant, his doorway, be his bondservant, and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, the false Sabbaths, the false holidays like Christmas and Easter, Halloween, after their error and after their ignorance. Jubilees 50:1-5. Then I made you understand the days of the weeks, the Sabbaths, in the wilderness of Sin between Elam and Sinai, and I related to you the Sabbaths of the land on Mount Sinai. Also the years of Jubilee in the Sabbaths of years I related to you. But its exact year, the exact year of the Jubilee, I have not related to you until you enter the land which you will possess. Then the land will keep its Sabbaths. When they dwell upon it, they will know the year of Jubilee. Well, they have to own land, be able to let land rest. So they weren't given the sabbatical and the Jubilees to rest the land until they actually had land. There are still 40 years before you for learning the commandments of Eloah until we cross the border of the land of Canaan, crossing the Jordan on the western side. Thus, Jubilees will pass until Israel is purified from all the sins of fornication. Wow. The Israelites wandered for 40 years, and because of her continued disobedience and fornication with their idols, the ecclesia has now wandered through that same wilderness, without knowledge of the proper appointed times of Yahuwah. Now, is this a salvational issue? Absolutely. Because meeting with Yahuwah at the correct time is his mark placed upon his people. Yahuwah gave his division of days to man through the scriptures, inspired writings like Enoch, Jubilees, historic accounts as found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and by the natural order of the movement of the heavens. Yet, as written in Jubilees, Yahuwah knew his people would still mess it up. This is why we must deprogram and reboot our minds away from the Greek way of thinking and return back to the simplicity of Yahuwah's creation. If we once again become in tune with nature, the way Yahuwah ordained it, we will live in harmony with his word and be in his set times. Throughout the scriptures, we are instructed to memorialize different events. The Passover, for example, is a reenactment year after year on its fixed 14th day of the first month. And so it is with the Sabbath, a reenactment of the first. And as Numbers 10:10 told us, not only a reenactment, but a memorial. Now the problem with trying to keep the Gregorian Saturday as always being Sabbath